parking at Barker Park. And I just think the impact is enough on the citizens in that area. So I know we're not focusing on the validity of movies in the park, but I still feel strongly about the 10 o'clock issue for Barker Park.
Other comments?
When you first did the movies in the park, when it was the smaller one, there was a lot of concerns about the garbage and, the kids. So since you've done the movies, that was it hasn't been a problem or an issue, or when, I don't remember when you started doing the movies in Barker Park, other than when it was the smaller one.
So like I said about the sound and rotating the different parks, when we switched to doing that a few years ago, we haven't had any issues with garbage. In fact, like I said before, we'd had issues with attendance just because the people who came were the people who were coming specifically to watch the show. It wasn't just a weekly hangout in the same place. So we haven't had any issues since.
Would it be difficult to just hold the movies in the park at the aquatic center consistently? We already have a screen, even though it's a blow-up screen.
Yeah, we do have 2 movies at the aquatic center each summer, but because the pool is open, it does require our lifeguard staff to be there, and we do charge admission, where the movies in the park are not charged admission.
Other comments from the council?
I like Ryan's suggestion.
Pardon?
I like Ryan's suggestion.
Can that suggestion be accommodated?
So it would be using this silent audio system, and then I think right now the movies are scheduled to be spaced out 3 weeks apart. The goal there to try and keep it so it's people who come to see the movie, not people who just come to hang out in the park because their friends hang out there every Friday. And so I think that would be accomplished under option 2 that was presented, which would allow the amphitheater for city-sponsored events to be open till 11, but loudspeakers would have to be off by 10. And we always have staff at there at the movies in the park because they have to operate the equipment. But we just essentially have someone who, we'd have someone there who can tell people, hey, you can't broadcast it, you've got to use your headphones. So.
So with what Ryan said, we could do it in another park without any kind of a new ordinance, correct?
Especially the silent version.
The silent version.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? I'm not asking you, I'm asking.
I think we've discussed that we got a 30-day trial period. So let's try it for the 2 shows and come back and see how it works. 'Cause that would be within 30 days, right? Right at one of our other parks. Just see how it works.
I think the only thing that'll be an issue is setup time and take down time, because at the amphitheater we can just shut the door and walk away. For example, I worked a little bit on this device today to make sure we were setting it up the right way, because if you plug the wrong thing in at the wrong time, you have to start from the beginning and replug everything in again, which is, that's just what networks do sometimes. So that's one benefit to using a facility where everything can be locked up, the door rolled up at 8:30 in prep for the show, and In the other parks, we have a setup and cords and things that are, you know. But I think from the staff level, we're happy to try whatever council would like to do.
I'd like to see it tried, just at a different park, and then we'll discuss, and if we need to make a amendment to the ordinance at that time, we can do it.
You guys are looking at me.
I'm just wondering which
You're on
thing.
the end.
I'm on the end.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to, my feelings have always been, we need to experiment with it at a different park. So if we wanted to experiment it with this Wi-Fi, I think it needs to be done at a different park. Movies in the park needs to be at a different park.
At least if we do it that way, and we'll know it works or it doesn't work. Then then we'll just know if, rethink it again or amend the ordinance to make it. At least we can try this first.
So with that already in our ordinances, John, is there anything that we need to do, or do we just give a nod and we'll give it a shot in a different park? Decide which park?
There's nothing we'd need to do under our current ordinance.
Okay. Tiffany, do you have a preference of where it should go? Oh, there you are. I was looking for you back in the back. Which other park?
I would have to go take a look at it. It would probably just depend on how far I would have to pull power
Okay.
because of all the different pieces of equipment that I'll have to power.
Have some really big extension cords.
What's that?
Have some really big extension cords. Great.
Okay.
Well, it seemed like, this is just me and I don't want to be beating a dead horse, but it seemed like Oakland was still the best place because there's just enough, there's more trees down in that area that you could probably see the screen better there. You've got more parking spot, we've got the concession. Seems the more logical place.
Is there power close by at Oakland?
In the trees, there's not.
No, but I mean up on the, yeah. No. And there's no place to sit down there in the trees either.
There is one little alcove.
Is there?
Well, we're not talking about holding the movie down inside the actual hollow, just on maybe that lower screen or that lower field.
Number 2.
Right.
I had a baby kid up there just recently.
Yeah.
I'm in the fields.
Seems like, I'm not, I'm not an expert, but it seems like that would be one of the best fields to be able to have this movies in the park.
Does Mountain View get the wind?
Can. But every park can get the wind.
Especially Oakland. It's the wind.
Yeah, there's not a lot of trees that protect it from wind.
Mm-mm.
Well, Tiffany will let you make that decision, I guess. In agreement?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm in agreement.
Okay.
Okay. We'll proceed on with the agenda. Discussion or action to consider rezoning property located approximately 2550 north and 250 east from residential RE20 to commercial C-2. Presenter will be Brandon Bill, our associate planner.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. As the mayor stated, this is a agenda item is regarding consideration for the rezoning of property. It's at 2550 north and 250 east. Ned, I'm wondering if you can look up what's labeled attachment A. It's an attachment to the ordinance. Has a map of the property with a red box around it. I'm going to have that ready in a few moments. The property is about 2 acres. Current zoning is RA20, and it's proposed to be rezoned to the C2's commercial zone. And typically, when the city council or the planning commission considers this type of rezone item, we read a decision statement. This is a legislative item, and the decision statement is as follows. When the city is considering a legislative land use matter, the planning commission acts as a recommending body to the city council. The city has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions require that the planning commission give a recommendation to the city council. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. Background on this item is that the applicant represents the owner of a parcel at 2550 North and 250 East. My understanding is that the property is in transition the ownership is in transition for this parcel. And so either the owner or the former owner has applied for a boundary line adjustment for this parcel and an adjoining parcel that's related to this rezone item. The property that will be within the boundaries of the northern portion of the property, once the proposed boundary line adjustment is complete, is a portion that is desired to be rezoned by the applicant. And you can see on attachment A, this box on the northern portion of the property. That's the portion that's being proposed to be rezoned, and it currently cuts across an existing parcel. And so staff's, later I'll discuss a little bit more, staff's recommendation is that if this ordinance is approved, that it be subject to a boundary line adjustment, which will adjust the property line to be consistent with the lower portion of that red box, so that the zoning will meet the guideline that the city has, that the zoning boundaries fall on the property lines instead of across a property line. And so that all lots and parcels are in one zone and rather than 2 or more. So regarding the general plan, the general plan map for the downtown area calls for this property to be mid-box commercial. The C2 zone would allow that type of development. The following policy, and so I'm going to read some statements regarding our zoning, from our zoning and land use policy, which are a number of guidelines in that policy. The following policy consists of general statements to be used as guidelines. Such guidelines may on occasion conflict when several are compared. In such cases, the Planning Commission should prioritize the guidelines as they pertain to the specific parameters of the issue which is pending. All zoning requests should first be evaluated for their compliance with the general plan. So what I'm going to do is read each guideline and then staff comment on those on each guideline as I go through the set of guidelines. The first guideline is a definite edge should be established between the types of uses to protect the integrity of each use, except where the mixing of uses is recommended in the general plan. Staff comment on this is that this type of development would be consistent with the use that has been approved to the east of this property. No differing or incompatible uses are currently proposed for this area. Mixing of uses is recommended in the general plan in this area. The next guideline is that zoning should reflect the existing use of property to the greatest extent possible, unless the area is in transition or is in conflict with the general plan. Staff comment on this guideline is that this is an area that is in transition with recently approved commercial uses. The proposed zoning would allow development that is consistent with the general plan for this specific property. The next guideline is that where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or a similar zone. Collector and arterial roads may be sufficient buffers to warrant different zones. The staff comment on this guideline is that if rezoned, the property would be in the same zone as the property across the street going into the east. The property would have a differing zone than the property across the street to the north. However, there is an arterial type street, which is 2600/2700 north between this property and the property to the north. The next guideline from our zoning and land use policy is that zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments, i.e. placing the lot in two separate zones. Illogical boundaries should be redrawn to follow property or establish geographical lines. This is the guideline that I referenced a moment ago about why staff recommends that this rezone be subject to the approval and recording of boundary line adjustment, which adjusts the property lines in which the applicant's already applied for. It just has not completed processing. Staff's comment on this guideline is that the proposed zone change would not cause the boundaries of the new zone to cross property lines, assuming that the change in zones is not effective until the associated boundary line adjustment being processed for this property is completed. For this reason, staff recommends that this zone change not take effect until the associated boundary line adjustment is completed. This condition is reflected in the actual language of the proposed ordinance. So the ordinance is written such that the zoning wouldn't take effect until the boundary line adjustment was approved and completed, to make sure that the zoning is consistent with the lot boundaries. The zoning change is consistent with the lot boundaries. And so you wouldn't need to add anything to your motion on that. It's already in the text of the ordinance. On commercial guidelines from the zoning and land use policy, the next guideline is that generally commercial zones should be located along Washington Boulevard and 2700 North Streets, avoiding local streets which serve residential zones. Access to commercial zones should avoid local streets within residential zones. Staff comment is that the property that is proposed to be rezoned is along one of the streets mentioned here, which is 2600/2700 North. And then the next guideline is that adhere to the general plan recommendations for the downtown and Southtown. Staff comment is that the proposed application area is consistent with this guideline. See. And the next guideline is that if compatible with the general plan, existing businesses on collectors and arterials should be allowed to expand while providing an adequate buffer with adjacent residential zones. Staff comment is that the proposed rezone does not itself expand any businesses. The commission can decide if this provides an adequate buffer. I'm sorry, that should say the council. The council can decide if this provides an adequate buffer from the residential zones to the north and south. And I have a zoom in on the zoning map to show you what the surrounding zones are. We'll get to in a minute. And then the next guideline is to encourage commercial uses to be developed with a focus towards walkable streets with buildings approaching the sidewalks, rather than as a standard strip commercial with parking adjacent to the road. The council should determine if this guideline is met or if they should prioritize the other guidelines listed in this report. The next guideline is that consider development agreements to assure higher quality development. Staff comment is that application of this zone would not preclude the use of a development agreement in the future. And then final guideline is that to promote mixed-use developments. The only staff comment on that is that the proposed zone does not require mixed-use developments. Let's see. Do we have a pointer available? I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of technical details that were made to the ordinance from the version that was presented in Planning Commission. There's nothing that affects any privately owned property, but as I was reviewing this ordinance, I realized that in order that we have a standard that says that zones should change at the center of the street. And so I've added a note both on the attachment to the ordinance as well as the ordinance itself that states that the R110 zone across the street would be extended to the center of the road to meet this C2 zone if it's rezoned. There were a couple other minor changes that were made in this version of the ordinance from the version presented to the Planning Commission that were, again, just technicalities. Given that the ownership of we were informed that the ownership of the parcel was in transition. The language was changed to allow the present owner or future owner for this to apply to them, not just the long-standing owner that as they've been working to sell it. And then, the same change that was made on the map that would allow the R110 zone to extend to the center of the road from across the street. So they're, instead of having a C2 commercial zone here and then an RE20 zone that would come up on the other half of the street, the ordinance was changed so that the R110 zone that starts on the north side of 2700 North would come to the center of the road. And that change was made both on the map and then in the ordinance itself. So it was pretty minor changes. They don't affect any privately held property, but it was the purpose of those was to bring it in the proposed rezone into conformity with our guidelines. The Planning Commission recommendation is that the Planning Commission voted 6-0 to recommend that the property be rezoned with the condition that the rezone not be effective until the associated boundary line adjustment has been recorded. The City Council, and again, that's reflected in the text of the ordinance, the City Council should consider the zoning and land use guidelines and determine if the proposed rezone from residential RE20 to the commercial C2 zone is appropriate for this property and make a decision. If you could pull up, Annette or John, the last page of the staff report. I have a cropped zoom in on the zoning map that will show you the surrounding zones. So the blue is RE20, which is a lower density residential single-family home zone, and it also allows agricultural uses. This is on the parcel. It's on the block that's just to the north of the city swimming pool, and then there's a commercial zone just to the east, and then you have Lee's across the street in another commercial zone, and then a single-family residential zone right here. What the applicant is requesting is that this be rezoned. This property right here be rezoned, which is just the northern half of this, or north, northern quarter of this block, and then and they're proposing that, and then again, that would be, the intent would be that this would take effect once. This is basically half of a piece of property that the western boundary of is right here. That once that zone, that property is adjusted to be consistent with this property line with the rezone territory, then it would take effect. So that it would only be on one piece of property, or be one complete piece of property in one complete zone. I think that covers all of my comments. Does the council have any questions for me at this time?
Annette, what's the ordinance number?
It is 2019-12.
You have to have
Need to have
public comments.
Other public comments regarding this particular item?
I'm prepared.
My name is Jake Tate with Anderson Wallen Associates. My address is 2010 North Redwood Road in Salt Lake City. I'm here I'm the applicant of this, representing America First Credit Union, who has purchased the north parcel from the Howes family. And I'm really just here to answer any of your questions. I agree with staff's assessment, and just if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them for you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for coming. Seeing no other public comments, we'll proceed with a motion.
I move that we accept ordinance 2019-12, rezoning the property located at 2550 North and 250 East from residential RE20 to commercial C2.
Motion's been made by Councilman Severin to approve the rezoning located approximately 2550 North, 250 East from residential RE20 to commercial C2. Ordinance number 2019-12.
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilman Swanson. Any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll begin the voting with Councilman Severin,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swenson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Discussion or action to consider ordinance for complete streets policy. Our presenter will be Rob Scott, our planning director.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and audience. North Ogden City has been involved in working on the implementation of our general plan, which was adopted back in 2015. And so one of the significant components of that general plan was the recommendation and direction to establish a complete streets policy for the city. This is now before you for your consideration. So the Planning Commission has been appraised of this. They had a draft review back in May, had a public hearing on June 5th, and their recommendation is before you. One of the things that is pretty obvious about a growing city is that our transportation network is rapidly expanding. And as a part of that expansion, it requires the coordination with other agencies such as the Utah Department of Transportation, Wasatch Front Regional Council, Utah Transit Authority, our neighboring communities, Weber County, et cetera. As part of that, as part of this coordination and what have you, one of the significant steps forward that is in our general plan is to recommend the creation of a complete streets policy. Well, what is a complete streets policy? It basically is a document that is going to help guide us as far as the way that we plan our transportation network. So it is an ordinance that is going to be incorporated within our public works standards, and it basically requires that all of the various departments within the city take into account the guiding principles that are in this policy as part of the planning for our transportation network. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time with respect to our complete streets policy as part of the general plan. The introductory paragraph for this from the general plan, I'm going to quote this: "A complete street design integrates diverse modes of transportation in a way that benefits the widest portion of the city's population as possible. A basic complete street would typically include bike lanes comfortably sized traffic lanes for speed calming. Complete streets could also include a paved multi-use path, dedicated transit lanes, street furniture, other traffic calming devices, and transit stations. Curb bulb outs and raised crosswalks are also ways to increase crossing safety." So it's a combination of recognizing that we're planning our traffic network, our transportation network that goes beyond cars. And it includes all modes of transportation, both pedestrian as well as vehicular, bicycles, etc. So as part of that, I've given you several documents, including the excerpt from the general plan regarding the complete streets policy. I've also given you, as part of our staff report, is a summary, and of course you have the policy itself. So there are 8 sections within the proposed policy. There's a vision and intent section. There's a section dealing with objectives, guiding principles, jurisdiction and scope, exceptions, design standards, performance measures, and policy implementation. So it's a balanced approach that we, as part of our transportation planning, take into account these basic standards and guidelines, so that as part of our street network, that we have a process in place that allows us to meet these objectives. The other thing that I think is significant about this is the last two, and that are the section that deals with performance measures and policy implementation. Well, one of the significant things about transportation is that there's lots of opportunity for us to be able to measure how we're doing as far as our transportation network. So we have lots of data that our public works people keep, our city engineer keeps, relative to the total number of miles that we have, the trail system, et cetera. All of those things are a part of that, and it's an opportunity for us to be able to measure on an ongoing basis the significance of how we're doing as far as having a balanced network of transportation throughout the city. So the Planning Commission has found that the Complete Streets policy is consistent with the general plan. They unanimously recommend adoption by the City Council. And I'll be happy to answer questions, Council.
Councilman Swanson.
Rob, a couple of questions.
Sure.
One of our residents during public comments mentioned that through the Complete Streets that residents would be told what they can plant in their yards as far as trees go. Is that correct?
Not according to this policy, no.
Okay.
Have
What's
they-
that?
Different one from the
Is that a different?
Economic Development Committee.
In the streetscape ordinance that's forthcoming, we're going to be recommending some street trees along various streets and what have you.
That's in the park strip, right, which is
that's-
city property,
Correct.
not in the actual yard of a resident.
No,
Okay.
no, sir.
That's how I remembered it. I just wanted to make sure that,
Right. As Kai will be sharing with you, the Planning Commission's recommending a couple of street species along Washington Boulevard and 2700 North. As we go forward, we'll be doing similar standards for other collector and arterial streets, and we'll also be doing those for local streets as well. But it is totally within the public right-of-way that these policies are geared to be an implementing tool for the city. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one real quick one on, let me get there. This was not one of the 8 guideline, what did you call them, Rob, guidelines?
Well, they're just the subheadings, if you will,
So
8 sections.
adopting this does not necessarily mean that there was something that the medians were, I think it said, consider. It said, consider drought-friendly landscape decorative medians on major collector and arterial streets. So when it says consider here, that doesn't mean if we pass this, that's automatically gonna be included medians, right?
What will happen is that as each street is designed, City Council, you're going to be intimately involved in what that design ultimately ends up being. So as part of having an effective streetscape in that, it's going to include potentially planted medians on certain streets. And typically those would be our arterial streets, maybe even some major collectors.
So again, it's at the option as streets are being constructed and
Right.
designed.
So as you'll see there, we have put together a table that shows the right-of-way within our streetscape for Washington Boulevard. And we'll be following that same template for these other streets. So the council will have an opportunity to decide up front what the ultimate goal and what the overall look is going to be for these streets.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions, council? I think this is just from a personal perspective, I think this is a good step forward for us.
Thank you for that presentation,
You're welcome.
Rob. Other questions or discussion from the council? We have an ordinance number for this one.
Yes, it is 2019-13.
there's no discussion or questions, I'd entertain a motion for the approval of the ordinance for the complete streets policy 2019-13.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the complete streetscape policy has been outlined, and the ordinance number is 2019-13.
I think that's complete streets policy, not the streetscape.
Oh, that's true. I was down one. Okay, try this again. To consider the ordinance to adopt the complete streets policy, has been outlined by Rob Scott.
Okay, we've had a motion to approve the ordinance for a complete streets policy 2019-13.
I'll second.
I have a second for Councilman Barker. Any other questions or discussion? We will begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severing.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 10, discussion or action to consider the ordinance for streetscape standards. Presenter will be Kai Johnson, our planning technician.
Mayor, if I could just introduce Kai. As a planning intern, it's not very often that you get a chance to have a pithy project that you get to sink your teeth into. I remember my first project was sampling garbage in the Davis County landfill. So this is a whole lot more fun and a whole lot more significant as well. One of the things that we've been working with, and I have to compliment our various commercial partners along the way, along Washington in particular, that have indicated they would be willing to work with us based on the ultimate determination by the council and the adoption of some streetscape standards. So there's about 4 or 5 projects that once this is adopted, we'll be able to go back to them and be able to have some consistency with respect to our overall design for that space that goes along Washington. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kai.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So if you recall, this Planning Commission has been working on this for quite a while. We've had several meetings. We've worked with the Economic Development Committee, and we've tried to come up with something that is cohesive and works well for everybody along, at least along Washington Boulevard, as far as business owners and residents. Can we pull up the table, John? So the Planning Commission has unanimously passed on a recommendation. They have some kind of desired trees that we can look at here in a moment. But as far as my project as the complete streets policy, this is, like Rob was saying, this will be a template for the other streets as we move forward in adopting a design for them. My part of the design was more so in the streetscape area, the area behind the curb to the edge of the right-of-way, and that's the pedestrian zone. If we can scroll down there and look at that a little closer. So the Planning Commission would like to see an 8 or a 10-foot sidewalk with opening up to design options, not tying us to a set number. And they want to have flexibility with tree species or spacing, excuse me, and they're okay with to see 2 large or medium-sized trees or 4 smaller-sized trees. Furnishings and things to be approved more so as things redeveloped and as are appropriate. If we could look at the trees that they recommending are the flowering crabapple and the Canadian choke cherry, and we have pictures of those as well. Do we have those, John?
I'm trying to find them.
Okay. No. You're good. So in our discussions, the Planning Commission has started to recognize the the need for wider sidewalks with scooters, you know, that are coming into Ogden are going to start finding their way here. And we went on a field trip with the Ogden city planner, Greg Montgomery. There was some concern about the width of the sidewalks until that field trip. It was funny how after that field trip, they really realized a 10-foot sidewalk in context is not as wide as it sounds. So that was kind of a turning point. So here we have the flowering crabapple. It's suitable for Washington because it stays low under the power lines. And then the Canadian choke cherry, I think, is 2 slides down. You can't see it very well, but in lieu of cherry trees, which was identified that the salt would end up killing them in less than 5 years, these trees have a similar shape and coloring to those types of trees. Same effect, trees won't die. Okay, am I missing anything, Rob? Any issues that we need to talk about or any questions from the council regarding this design?
So these would be going in on 2700 North, Gaia,
27 in Washington.
and Washington?
Yeah.
Weren't they concerned about the trees blocking the commercial?
That is, and that would be in the site plan review. They've come up with a plan that requires trees and allows for flexibility in placement of the trees to allow for businesses to be visible as well as their signage. The Planning Commission recognizes the importance of trees and that they are a key element of a streetscape, yet they are sensitive to the Economic Development Committee's recommendation that they don't be, the rigid placement and spacing was the issue.
Wouldn't anything crabapple be something that we would want to avoid because of the?
If I recall correctly, this is non-fruiting.
I had a flowering crabapple tree that was supposed to be non-fruiting, and it was not a truism. I had crabapples all over. They are a messy tree.
Sometimes trees that are sterile from producing fruit, as the years go by, they seem to evolve into fruiting type trees. And I don't know what guarantee we would have regarding what tree would not do that.
Yeah. Any questions? Any
Questions for Kai?
Were we talking medians as well, or just the trees tonight?
It's trees, walkways, and furnishings. They want to see bike lanes and parallel parking added to the street. The street side of things is more in the UDOT,
Okay.
kind of complete streets policy type of zone.
So, Councilmember, if we get to the point where we're working with UDOT on getting some planted medians in that, we would be working with them to identify any type of trees or other types of features that would be included within those medians. So that design would be forthcoming at that time.
For the record, I'm against medians, but that's
In any
that's
case,
working with the fire department where we can't get around them sometimes.
well, the Planning Commission is recommending that they be included at some point in time, so it's consideration. So
But again, subject to
approval.
site plan and approval by the city council.
ultimately, it is. Correct.
Because I worry about the same issue, well, not necessarily the fire truck issue, that's very legitimate. It seems like medians, we were concerned about what's happened here in the parking lot of the library, and it seems like it would just become a nightmare on the streets to have the medians, but just a thought.
We've done a lot of research with respect to various cities, and we've identified a number of places that have lots of options as far as the design for these medians, that Some include trees, some do not include trees. Some have shrubbery in them, some have some type of art feature or other types of things to help dress up the street and what have you. I think that,
They don't become an issue for, it's hard for me to believe that they wouldn't become an issue for snowplows.
well, anytime you have anything within the street that's permanent, it has to be avoided for sure.
You have an ordinance number on this one?
It is 2019-14.
Questions or other discussions, council?
So the council has the say on, what trees go along it with these choices? I've not been a fan of trees along the street anyway.
Well, what's included in, we purposefully have crafted this in such a way that it gives the planning commission lots of flexibility and the property owners lots of flexibility in proposing things. So what it's saying is that these are the two preferred species, and that as people come along, they may or may not have trees available, but we came up with a list of 8 different trees that potentially could be put in there. Those two happen to be the 2 preferred ones that the planning commission looked at. And we have the good fortune of having on our planning commission a landscape architect who was one of the ones that helped in that tree selection. So.
I'll make a motion, we approve ordinance 2019-14 for streetscape standards.
Motion's been made to approve the ordinance for streetscape standards 2019-14 by Councilman Barker
I second that.
and second by Councilman Severing. Begin the voting with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severing,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes, only because we have council approval on any of it, so yes.
Okay, motion passes. Item 11, discussion or action to consider an amendment to the Meridian Engineering Agreement A9-2016. Presenter will be John Call, City Manager, Attorney.
So, council, this is an agreement, when we first started the road widening project in the 2600 and the 400, 450 East area, Meridian Engineers was hired as the surveyors. As we've come closer to the final design work, it's been discovered that we need a couple things as additional work to be done, as well as for the acquisition packets, they have to look at some of the title work a little closer than they had anticipated, or I guess relook at it is probably the better way to say it. And so they have, with that agreement, it's everything's is exactly the same, except they have included this exhibit. This exhibit B. Oh, no, it's exhibit C. This additional scope of work. Sorry, it's right here. It's in its own separate file. So it's an additional scope of work for essentially $17,000. That's some additional topography work that's being done as we've made some additional decisions. Some of those decisions include the roadway out here where 450 East by the little strip mall that had the furniture store in it comes into the Smith's entrance. We're going to realign that Smith's entrance to make it a safer intersection. so that it'll almost operate like a four-way intersection, except one would be onto private property, to better line up the left-hand turn movements that go on in those two intersections. Another example is up at the Baptist church, and some of the houses north of the Baptist church. We need some additional topography work to figure out the driveway elevations and make sure we're designing driveways in a way that works for the residents. And those are the reasons for the changes. This is an agreement that was passed by the council back in 2016, and so it's coming back to you as an amended agreement because of the addition of this exhibit for task number 3. Any questions? Okay.
Questions or discussion from the council?
Does it have a separate agreement number, or?
Yes, it's A13-2019.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve agreement A13-2019, amending agreement A9-2016 with Meridian Engineering as discussed.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the amendment to Meridian Engineering Agreement A9-2016. The amendment will be A13-2019. Any questions or discussion? Begin the voting with Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Approved. Item 12, discussion or action to consider resolution amending the IMARC profit sharing agreement. Presenter will be Annette Spenlove, City Recorder and HR Director.
Mayor and council, you recently have adopted the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. And so ICMARC on your staff report, I've put those initials wrong. Those initials I put on there are the International Institute of Municipal Clerks Association. Sorry for that. Anyway, in that agreement needs to be modified to reflect the decisions you made when you adopted the budget. So page 2 adds the employer fixed contribution of 3%. Page 6 shows what we already are doing right now, a 3% match. If an employee puts in 3%, then the city will match at 3%. And page 7 shows the vesting period for employees. We changed that. We had talked about that in our budget, when we had our budget meetings, that we wanted to change that to 4 complete years to align with URS's, the pension vesting period. This agreement needs to be adopted by resolution, and so the agreement number is A14-2019, and the resolution number is 04-2019, so you'll adopt resolution 04-2019 to approve agreement A14-2019. Do you have any questions?
Questions from the council? If not, I'd entertain a motion
I'll
to
try
approve this.
motion.
We're just grateful we can do this for the employees.
I make a motion that we approve resolution 04-2019, which is approving agreement A14-2019, the profit sharing agreement as presented.
Good job.
Thank you, very good. Have a motion to approve,
Second.
then second by Councilman Severine. Any other question or discussion? We'll begin the voting then with Councilman Severine,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Motion approved. Item 13, discussion or action to consider an ordinance amending the personnel policy. Presenter will be Annette Spenlove, City Recorder, HR Director.
Okay, council, with the recently adopted budget for 2019-2020, we had to change the personnel policy to update those reflected decisions, plus the state legislature also passed a bill, House Bill 163. I'll let John talk more about that. It's relating to offenses against the misuse of government property, and this is to protect those employees assigned a city vehicle and have permission to take the vehicle home. So let me go over the items that we changed. On page 1, we changed the date to June 2019. Page 47 was to include permanent part-time employees who may receive merit increases. That was not in our policy currently, and they do receive merit increases. You've approved that in our budget. Page 58 was to add the additional 3% for the 401k contribution for full-time employees, not to exceed a total of 6% of the employee's annual salary. Page 59 is to reduce the vesting period for the city's contribution to employees' 401k from 5 years to 4 years, and this, of course, still is to align with the URS vesting period of 4 years. Page 72 was because of House Bill 163, place on July 1st, 2019. John, do you want to say any more about that House Bill?
Sure. So this is the new language. This was brought up by Councilman Turner with the mosquito board. If you remember, there was a story of an individual who's had to go to the hospital because a family member was there and they were in a mosquito vehicle. And so they technically could have been convicted of a second-degree felony for misuse of municipal equipment. This is written to try and accommodate those type of situations. As it relates to vehicle uses, it allows the employee who is authorized to take a vehicle home to run personal errands on the way home or back, stop and pick up a gallon of milk or something like that. As long as it doesn't go outside of 10 miles, detour, as well as they can't use the vehicle for any sort of construction equipment pickup, no gravel, no wood, things like that. It's meant to be kind of those benign errands that we all do on the way home to or from work or lunchtime. Technically, they could have been cited for driving to McDonald's or Lee's to get lunch during work hours when many of our supervisors and especially our police officers are required to take their vehicles home because they're on call or should the need arise. It also includes some occasional incidental use of personal or of city equipment that isn't vehicles. A good example is police officers who might go to the range and fire their service weapon to help practice. We wish we could get them out monthly on our range or even down at the Swanson Center, but we can't, and so oftentimes they're doing it on their own time. This would allow them to use their service weapon when they go to practice at the range without fear of being prosecuted, as well as, other incidental use of other things. It doesn't authorize, for example, in here, we added a specific provision that says there's no incidental personal use of earth-moving equipment. There is a provision in here that allows employees to use city earth-moving equipment in life safety issues, but that's typically going on in the city, and so it's going to be an authorized use anyways. But so that it's some nuanced language. We've tried to kind of capture all the loopholes without giving too much room. My understanding is this House Bill 163 was intended to capture the people who have clearly been violating the intent of their individual organizations' policies, but they couldn't be prosecuted because there was a loophole in the policy. So this is kind of a compromise to try and take the rigidness as well as the flexibility in the bill and write some language that we think works good for the city. So, any questions about that, and then I think Annette might have other stuff further down in the ordinance.
I just wanted to let you know that we are starting to review the personnel policies, and we will be bringing that back to you at a later date, but these were things that needed to be passed before July 1.
Is there an ordinance?
The ordinance number is 2019-15.
I move that we accept ordinance number 2019-15, amending the personnel policy.
Motion been made by Councilman Severin to approve the ordinance amending the personnel policy 2019-15,
I'll second.
and second by Councilman Barker. Any questions or discussion? If we begin the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilman Severin.
Yes.
Motion passes. Keep going. Item 14, discussion or action to consider resolution amending the flexible benefits plan.
Council, IRS raised the maximum medical limit on effective January 1, 2019 to $2,700 per year. It's in the IRS code, and that's section 125I2. Instead of the actual wording for, and over the years, we've amended it each time they've done things like this. And so I asked him, well, first of all, we have to have a provider that prepares our plan, and we use NBS, who does that for us. And we've amended our plan with them. This would have been the 5th time. So I asked them to put in the plan, instead of the amount, so we're not changing each time, to current IRS limit. But then they asked us also if they could take all those amendments and put them into a new plan. And we'd keep all the amendments we had in the plan we had, but make it all one document instead of 5 different documents. So some of the things that we've changed in the past haven't been us that's changed them. July 2009 was CHIP, the State Children's Health Insurance Plan, which allowed enrollment rights in the event a participant or his eligible dependent loses coverage under Medicaid or a state child health program, or become eligible for state assistance with respect to paying his or her contributions to the plan and COBRA provisions, so that they were protected. So that was added to the flex spending account. And then in 2010, there was Michelle's Law, and that was the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act. And then in 2008, there was a Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Well, that was in 2018. Michelle's Law went 2010, but it started in 2008. And in 2013, that's when we changed our plan from a calendar year to a fiscal year, so it was easier for our employees to keep track of their flexible spending instead of having part of it in 1 year of our fiscal year and then another part of our fiscal year. And then in 2014, we had that cost of living adjustment, raised the medical limit to not exceed $2,500, and the carryover amount was adjusted to $500. So this plan puts everything in one plan and makes it better for us. Not to say that the Congress won't change this plan again and we'll have more amendments. Anyway, this resolution is 05-2019. Do you have any questions?
Questions or discussion from the council? I would then entertain a motion to approve.
Mayor, I'll move that we approve Resolution 05-2019, amending the flexible benefits plan as discussed.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Swanson to approve the resolution amending the flexible benefits plan 05-2019. It's been seconded by Councilwoman Stoker. Any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll begin the voting with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker,
Yes.
Councilman Severie,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Approved.
Thank you, council.
Thank you, Annette. This concludes this agenda. We'll now open the meeting for public comments.
Bob, it's good to see you today.
Oh, well, thank you. Bob Buswell, 962 East, 3025 North, North Ogden. I'm representing the Kiwanis. On the 23rd of July, ballots will be sent out for mayor and also councilmen that are running for office. Kiwanis wants to meet the candidates night before the ballots are sent out. Teresa at Recreations and Parks okayed July the 22nd, Monday at 6:30 for the meeting. Also, I've been in contact 3 times today with Chris Batrick, who is the president of Kiwanis. He agrees to the date. I didn't think about it when I talked to Teresa and talked to Chris, that the 22nd is the rodeo, the Ogden Rodeo, but there are other nights that citizens can go, and I want the council to tell me whether they think that would be a good day. We can change it to a Wednesday if needed. Alma Harris has been the moderator in the past for the meeting, and Dave Powers will contact Alma Harris. As I understand, Berube and Satterthwaite are running for mayor, and there are 11 that are running for councilman. And I know Ryan Barker is one of them, and I need to know the other names so that Dave Powers can contact the candidates and let them know.
Bob?
Yes.
I can get, it's Annette. I can give you that information if you'll just call me. I've got their contact numbers and their names.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
And Bob, typically the council doesn't authorize the meet the candidates night, so it's just whatever you work out with Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Because it's a private group that's running it. We don't get involved.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Is there anything
Might
that needs
check
to be
with
brought up?
Mrs. Rodeo regarding your proposal.
I know 2 of us at least will be gone. I don't think you should put it on rodeo week because you won't get the attendance. 'Cause it's
So
right-
you'll have to work that out. That's nothing to do with us.
Yeah. Annette, is there a Wednesday night that's available? That you gave me some dates that there was a problem with being booked, and I didn't write them down.
I can give you the days of council meeting and the days of other meetings.
Okay, and the Tuesday night, of course, wouldn't be good because of council meeting.
That might be a great night.
Pardon me?
Yeah, Bob, just give me a call and I'll give you those dates again that we
Okay.
have meetings. But like John said, the council can't make that decision.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other comments, we'll move on to the comments from the City Council. Councilman Severie?
Yeah, just a couple things. If they could follow up, if maybe John, whoever could follow up with Dave on the sign near the creamery. The owners of the creamery are still concerned about that turn right there. And I think last time we talked to Dave was looking into putting up some kind of a sign there. And then I had a citizen ask me about the value of having the aquatic center actually use the Groupon, and wondered if that was a financially wise decision to use Groupon. So just a couple of things that.
Okay.
It seems like Groupon, and I don't know that much about Groupon, but it sounds like by the time they use Groupon, they collect like 50% of whatever of like the cost. So if somebody was spending $5, they take like 50% of that. So wondering just about the legitimate need of the Groupon for the aquatic center. And that's all I have.
Okay. We'll do some research on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Barker?
I've got nothing tonight.
Okay. Councilman Swanson?
Just wondering how Dave is doing.
I had a little
Doing well?
back spin today. He's
Did he?
not doing as well.
Okay.
Dave Espinoza had a,
Yeah, he has.
oh, what happened to
I'll tell
him?
you afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Councilwoman Stoker?
Yes. Council, I don't know if you got the email from Carly Barker regarding the amphitheater, and that they want to use it in August the 16th, and they do it every year since their oldest brother and his 4-year-old daughter were killed in a car crash, and they do a moonlight ride every year. And so they brought it to me and for discussion, and they say there'd be about 200 people that would be there, and the time is from, Rod, when was the time? From 6 to 9?
6 to 9.
Yeah.
Isn't this a scheduling issue rather than anything to do with council?
Well, so council hasn't set the rates for the rental and stuff yet. So everything's still been in flux with this last phase of things happening. But essentially this type of an event, this isn't the only person who's called to ask to use the facility, but as of right now, the Parks has said, well, we haven't said anything. And so I guess the real question is, does the council want to take that on in one of our next meetings? And then we can start scheduling events.
I think we need to do that. It would show its use. I don't know, that's kind of it's not really a nonprofit, but it's kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
Charitable.
Charitable,
That's what it's for.
right?
The only real distinction that we could probably make is private versus public.
Yeah.
So like if Northview Fire was doing something, we could let them do something that we weren't letting private entities do. But the private entities, we'd just want to treat them all the same. So whether it's a nonprofit or not, we just want to treat them the same.
So Moonlight Ride, what are we riding?
Mountain bikes.
Mountain bike.
Mountain bikes? Okay.
Bikes.
Well, it could have been Harleys, right?
This is true, or dirt bikes.
It could have been something really, really obnoxious.
So you meet at Barker Park, for example, maybe go up onto the Bonneville Trail and then come back down, or?
We generally just want the amphitheater from 7 till 9 for Friday. Entertainment, and then the bike ride would be Saturday, the full moon up at Powder Mountain.
Powder Mountain.
Okay. John,
Yes.
any
So
questions or comments?
we'll put some stuff together and bring it back to you. Our plan had been to have the Arts Guild do this, but it hasn't. We haven't filled that yet. Obviously, we were going to start a booth at Cherry Days, or it would be at the information booth, but let people know, how to submit applications. The idea will be that there'll be 3 people who will be picked to start the group, and then those 3 will look at the rest of the applications and pick the rest of the members. Where the goal is, I think, to try and set this up as its own separate entity eventually, and so it'd be as limited city involvement as we can. We'd need to essentially establish some rules now, and then let the Arts Guild amend those as they felt appropriate. So.
Anything else? Annette?
I don't have anything.
Chief? Okay. Evan?
I had a comment on crabapple trees. These trees out here in the grass are actually crabapple trees. And they are basically a non-fruiting variety. And so they're not too messy and they're really pretty. So crab apples come in hundreds of varieties and with varying degrees of messiness. So there are some that are not really messy. Others are quite messy. So just wanted to point that out, that we have a good example of a very good crab apple tree right here at City Hall.
Thank you. Lauren?
I just wanted to mention to the council that our debris basin up at White Rock, at the mouth of the divide there, is approximately substantially complete. So they're just doing their punch list items now, and it turned out to be a really good project, and we had a really good contractor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to all of you for attending this evening and your contributions to our meeting. We appreciate it very much. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to stay longer. I just had to throw that out there once.
You're free to do so. Somebody else like to give a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and second to adjourn. Meeting adjourned.
If anyone's paying attention.